You think you're failing because you're not good enough, not smart enough, not talented enough. You watch others pass you by and you wonder, what do they have that I don't? Maybe you even convince yourself that you're broken, that you're missing some secret ingredient, some unstoppable motivation, some elite mindset that separates the winners from the ones who just never quite make it. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. You're not failing because you lack potential. You're failing because you're bored. You crave novelty, variety, excitement. You romanticize success as this cinematic journey, filled with high-stakes moments, life-altering decisions, dramatic breakthroughs, and sudden epiphanies. But that's not how it works. Real success is quiet. It's repetitive. It's unglamorous. It's waking up and doing the same thing you did yesterday, even when nobody claps, even when it doesn't feel magical anymore, even when you don't feel like it and it seems like nothing is changing. It's unlearning the idea that progress must feel like progress, because sometimes it just feels like showing up, dragging yourself forward inch by inch with no explosion of dopamine, no crowd cheering you on. And here's the part no one wants to hear. Most people will never succeed, not because they don't have the tools, but because they can't handle the boredom of consistency. They think boredom is a sign they're doing the wrong thing, when in reality, it's a sign they're finally doing the right thing. Long enough for it to work, so they quit, right before the shift, right before the breakthrough, right before the momentum compounds, because success is boring. And in a world addicted to stimulation, boredom feels like death. But if you can sit with it, if you can outlast it, if you can show up long after the thrill has died, you'll become dangerous, because no one can stop the person who keeps moving forward, long after everyone else has gone home. There was a time when you could sit with yourself, when silence wasn't terrifying, when repetition wasn't unbearable, when the absence of stimulation didn't feel like losing your mind. But now you panic at the thought of doing nothing. You reach for your phone the second you feel discomfort. You switch tasks before your brain can even settle into one. You can't even enjoy your own presence without external input. Music, videos, scrolling, someone else's voice in your ear. And that wouldn't be a problem if it weren't the exact reason why your dreams are slipping through your fingers. See, success doesn't operate on dopamine. It doesn't reward you for how excited you feel. It rewards you for how consistent you are when there is no excitement left. And that's where most people fall. They confuse stimulation with growth. They think something is working only if it feels intense. They think change has to feel like fireworks, when in truth, it often feels like sweeping the same dusty floor every single day. The modern world has trained your mind to reject this reality. Your nervous system is wired for novelty, not because you're weak, but because you've been conditioned that way. Your apps are designed to hook you. Your social platforms are built to manipulate your attention. The most addictive minds of our time, neuroscientists, behavioral engineers, attention architects, have built your daily environment to make boredom unbearable. And so you've been taught to run from stillness, to abandon routines the moment they stop feeling fresh, to label anything repetitive as uninspiring, inefficient, or even oppressive. But let's call it what it is, an addiction. You are addicted to beginnings, addicted to the rush of possibility, but allergic to the discipline that actualizes it. You download a new habit tracker. You build a new vision board. You rearrange your schedule, buy a new book, start a new diet, and for a few days you feel unstoppable, until the rush fades and the silence returns and the work becomes just work. And suddenly you wonder if this was ever the right path to begin with. So you look for the next high, the next book, the next idea, the next method. Not because you're evolving, but because you're escaping. You've mistaken constant movement for meaningful motion. You think quitting something for being boring is a form of self-awareness. It's not. It's self-sabotage wearing a clever disguise. Let me ask you this. Do you really want success, or do you just want the feeling of moving toward it? Because one is thrilling, the other is excruciating. Success feels like doing the same boring thing every day. Long after the thrill has died, long after the motivation fades, long after the voices around you lose interest. It feels like writing when the words aren't flowing, like working out when no progress shows, like waking up at the same hour, eating the same meals, facing the same discomforts over and over and over again, because you said you would. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you can't survive that boredom, you don't deserve what's on the other side of it. Greatness doesn't come from those who feel the most passion. It comes from those who can endure the dullness, those who can make peace with monotony, those who can fall in love with the repetition that success demands. The world's greatest artists, athletes, thinkers, and warriors, they didn't win because they were constantly inspired. They won because they trained when they were tired. They practiced the same scales, rehearsed the same drills, meditated on the same ideas for years until it broke them open. Bruce Lee once said, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times." Think about that. How many kicks have you given up on before reaching even 100? Success is not about intensity. It's about duration. But duration is boring, and boring is hard, and hard is why you fail. At some point, you started believing that boredom was a red flag, that when things felt flat, unchanging, or repetitive, you must be doing something wrong, that the lack of excitement wasn't just a feeling, but a sign, a signal that the path you're walking isn't meant for you. But that's not a sign, that's conditioning. You've been trained to expect transformation to feel exciting. You've been sold the story that change should always come with clarity, that alignment feels like passion, that finding your purpose means you'll wake up every day electrified and inspired. That's a lie. One of the most seductive, paralyzing lies of modern self-help. Because when you believe boredom means misalignment, you'll never stay long enough to build anything real. You'll keep pivoting, changing paths, rewriting plans, thinking you're being wise and intuitive, when really you're just uncomfortable with stillness. But real transformation is not loud. It's not always thrilling. It's a slow death of who you used to be and the painstaking birth of who you're trying to become. And that process, it's awkward, it's messy, and yes, most of the time it's boring. You wake up early, you do the work, you get no feedback, no applause. You keep going. It's not glamorous, it's not shareable. It doesn't look like a montage. It looks like waking up and wondering if what you're doing is even working. Then doing it anyway, because that's what mastery demands. Faith without feelings, action without confirmation, progress without proof. But we don't like that. We want signs. We want momentum to feel like momentum. We want the grind to sparkle like it does in movies with dramatic music, emotional breakthroughs, and perfect timing. Instead, what you get is repetition, monotony, a long stretch of days that all blur together. And so you label this feeling as failure. You assume you've hit a dead end, that you've picked the wrong strategy, the wrong goal, the wrong life. But what if it's not the wrong path? What if you're just on mile 3 of a 26-mile marathon, and because it doesn't feel like a sprint, you think you're in the wrong race? Boredom isn't failure. It's a transition phase. The moment when the old you is gone, but the new you hasn't fully arrived. It's the cocoon, the in-between, the place where most people quit. And here's the irony. The better you are at something, the more boring it gets. Because you've outgrown the beginner highs. You've mastered the basics. And now you're building refinement, consistency, nuance. And that's slow, invisible work. Michelangelo carved the Pietà in his early 20s, not in a manic burst of chaotic genius, but through months of silent chiseling, days that began in darkness and ended in the same, hours spent perfecting shadows that no eye would ever notice. He didn't wait for excitement. He waited for depth. And if he could carve eternity out of boredom, so can you. But you have to unlearn this modern lie. That boredom means failure. Because if you keep believing that, you'll never stay long enough to see what boredom was trying to build. You keep waiting for motivation to save you. You light a candle, watch a YouTube video, write a journal entry, and hope that a surge of energy will rise from somewhere deep inside. One powerful enough to carry you through the days ahead. And sometimes it does. For a day, maybe two, maybe even a week. But eventually it fades. The fire burns out, and you're left staring at the same task, the same goal, the same mountain you've been avoiding. Only now with guilt for not being motivated enough to keep going. But here's what no one tells you. Motivation is not meant to last. It's an impulse, not a structure. It's an emotion, not a strategy. You wouldn't build a house out of lightning, and yet you keep trying to build your future on something that strikes randomly, briefly, and then disappears. Motivation is the spark, but systems are the firewood. The people who succeed long-term, sustainably, quietly, aren't necessarily the most passionate or inspired. They're the ones who built their lives to not need inspiration. They created systems that carry them forward when every part of them wants to stop. A system doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't rely on your mood. It doesn't ask whether you're excited today or drained. It simply activates. You either follow it or you don't. And in that brutal simplicity lies its power. Think of the most powerful structures in nature, the tides, the sunrise, the turning of seasons. They don't ask permission. They don't wait to feel ready. They operate on rhythm, on pattern, on inevitability. Now ask yourself, what if your life worked the same way? What if you no longer needed to wrestle with your emotions every time a decision had to be made? What if your habits weren't choices, but identities you stepped into every single day? The writer doesn't wait to feel like writing. They write because that's who they are. The athlete doesn't wait to feel like training. They train because their system demands it. The disciplined don't have more willpower. They have fewer negotiations. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, said it clearly. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. You may dream of big results. You may visualize a version of you that's strong, successful, respected. But if your life is built around spontaneous bursts of motivation, you'll never meet that version of you. You'll burn out in the gap between vision and execution. Because without systems, everything is a debate. And when success becomes a debate, comfort always wins. So stop worshiping motivation. Stop trying to feel your way through a process that demands repetition. Instead, build a system so boring, so predictable, so reliable that you could follow it in your sleep. Because if you only show up when you feel like it, you'll fail every time life gets hard. And life will get hard. The Roman general Marcus Furius Camillus prepared for war as if it were a certainty, not a possibility. And when war came, he didn't need courage. He needed only his system. You don't need more inspiration. You need a structure that works even when you don't. There is a moment on every journey, quiet, invisible, and devastating, when most people walk away. Not because the path was impossible, but because it was uninspiring. You hit this moment when you've done everything right, when you've shown up for weeks, maybe months. You've planned, executed, pushed through the hard days, and still there's no reward, no breakthrough, no visible progress, no validation, just silence. And it's in that silence that the mind starts whispering, "This isn't working. This isn't worth it. You were never meant to make it anyway." That voice doesn't yell. It doesn't argue. It simply wears you down. One skipped day, one small excuse, one rational lie. "I'll try again later. Maybe I need something new." But what you're feeling in that moment isn't failure. It's not misalignment. It's not proof that your goal was wrong. It's the threshold, the space between effort and momentum, the place where the compound interest of your actions hasn't shown up yet. The valley before the climb. And almost everyone turns back here, because this is the part no one posts about. No one celebrates the days where nothing changes, where growth feels like decay, where consistency becomes a weight, where success feels like an illusion you're stupid for believing in. But if you could just keep going, if you could outlast that brutal, boring, hopeless stretch, you'd break through into a different world. Not one where the work gets easier, but one where it becomes automatic, where what used to take energy becomes identity, where effort becomes environment, where discipline becomes default. This threshold is not a wall, it's a filter. It separates the ones who romanticize transformation from the ones who actually earn it. It filters out the dabblers, the dreamers, the impulsive believers, and leaves only the ones who are willing to be bored to death if it means staying alive long enough to change. Thomas Edison made 1,000 failed prototypes before inventing the light bulb. Do you think the 476th attempt felt exciting? Do you think he was brimming with motivation on try number 812? Of course not. But he crossed the threshold because he wasn't chasing dopamine. He was chasing results. And that's what you need to remember. You don't need to feel good to keep going. You need to keep going to feel good. If you could just survive the middle, the slow, empty, silent middle, you would earn what few ever will. The right to say, "I didn't quit" when it stopped being fun. Because most people will only show up when it feels good. But you, if you stay when it's dull, when it's thankless, when it's invisible, you don't just win. You become the kind of person who was always meant to. So here you are, standing at the edge of your own threshold, not the one with flashing lights or a cheering crowd, the real one, the one hidden in the middle of repetition where no one is watching and nothing seems to be changing. And the question is simple: will you cross it, or will you keep convincing yourself that there's something wrong with the path, when really it's your need for excitement that keeps pulling you away? You've spent enough time romanticizing change. You've daydreamed, journaled, vision boarded your potential into oblivion. But now you know the truth. Success isn't found in the highs. It's earned in the lows, in the silence, in the boredom, in the moments where everything in you says, "This isn't working," and you still choose to keep going. Because the future you want, it's not hidden behind passion or motivation. It's hiding behind patience, behind structure, behind days that look exactly the same, until one day they don't. And you'll look back, not at a single magical moment that changed everything, but at 100 boring days that no one applauded, but you showed up for anyway. That's where you win, quietly, gradually, unstoppably. So stop chasing sparks, start building fires, and remember, your breakthrough is waiting on the other side of your boredom, but only if you're still standing when it gets there.